and 3 bullets fell into my palm. That's how I knew my sermon would draw blood before it drew souls. The Bible lay open on the saddle, its hollow belly spilling out brass instead of scripture. I closed it gentle, like tucking away a secret, and rode on into the dust. By the time I reached the sign that said Redemption Crossing, the redemption part had been half erased by the wind. The boards creaked like bones, and the air smelled of sand and regret. Folks peeked through shutter cracks as I passed, thin faces, hollowed eyes, a town starved of both water and mercy. The old church sat at the far end, leaning as though the ground itself had grown tired of holding faith. A cracked bell swung above it, striking off beat in the wind. I tied my horse beneath it and stepped inside. The pews were empty, save for dust motes drifting like lost souls. I preached anyway. Couldn't tell you why. Habit, maybe, or penance. My voice echoed against the walls, rough as gravel, reading words I didn't much believe anymore. Though I walked through the valley, I started, and somewhere outside, a dog barked, then whimpered. The place had the feel of a graveyard that hadn't yet decided what to bury. When the service ended, only one woman stood at the door. Widow's black dress, sun-bitten face. She looked at me too long before saying, "Name's Grace." I tipped my hat. "Preacher Jonah." Her eyes narrowed. We already had a preacher. He left after they shot the sheriff. I didn't answer. She didn't move. Then she said quiet, "You carry a gun in that good book of yours, preacher?" The question hit harder than the wind. "I carry what the Lord allows," I said. She nodded slow, but her gaze drifted to my hands, the calluses no holy man should have. That night she came by the boarding house with bread and a stare that could peel bark. She said, "I've seen your face before," pulling a paper from her coat. The wanted poster was old, rain-warped, but the likeness was me, younger and meaner. "Jonah Cross," she read. "Train robber, killer, last seen heading south." I stared at the floorboards. That man died in another desert. She folded the poster and tucked it back in her pocket. Maybe, but folks here are desperate. They'll follow anyone who sounds like hope, even a ghost. Next morning, word spread that a new preacher had come. They filled the church, not for faith, but for distraction. I spoke of forgiveness. They listened for weakness. Every amen felt like a test I hadn't studied for. By sunset, I knew the town wasn't just starving, it was waiting. I heard the first laugh behind me as I stepped out into the dying light. Low, familiar, cruel. From the saloon shadow walked a man with my same blood and a grin sharpened by years of hate. "Didn't think you'd ride into my parish, brother. The Lord sure got a sense of humor."
I used to believe a man could outpace his past if his horse was fast enough and his prayers were loud enough. Turns out both run out of breath sooner than guilt does. Eli's grin still haunted the church steps the next morning, though he and his boys had gone back to their saloon kingdom. The pews sat empty again. The faithful don't like their shepherds being wanted men. That night, I dreamt of a courthouse, the smell of sweat and whiskey. My father sat up high, black robe hiding the pistol at his hip. Judge Cross, circuit judge of the frontier, a man who thought God needed help swinging the hammer. "Sentence him, Jonah," he'd say. pointing at some dirt-poor boy trembling before us. Every man learns law by judgment. I was 10, Eli was 12, and we did what he told us. We played at being lawmen until we realized we were his tools. In the dream, the gavel cracked and the sound turned into gunfire. I woke with blood on my tongue and scripture on my lips. When I stumbled into the daylight, Grace was there, tending to her horse. She saw my shaking hands and the way I winced when I flexed them. "Those are gun calluses," she said. "No amount of psalms will hide them." She poured water into a tin cup and handed it over. "Why'd you come here, Jonah?" I stared past her, to the hills where the judge used to ride circuit. "Maybe to finish what he started," I said. She frowned. "Or to undo it." Before I could answer, a boy galloped up, breathless, dusty. He handed me a folded note. It read, "If you're truly a preacher, you'll deliver your sermon in my house, sundown. Don't be late." The saloon, his house. Grace grabbed the note from my hand. "You can't go. He's baiting you." I nodded. That's what brothers do. The priest from the ruined chapel found me packing my Bible, the one that hid my revolver. His face looked carved from worry. He said, "We prayed for deliverance, and you came." "I ain't what you prayed for, Father." But he touched my shoulder anyway. "Maybe not, but God answers desperate men with desperate tools." As the sun dropped behind the hills, I rode down the main street. The sky burned red like the world bleeding from old wounds. Townsfolk watched from porches, whispering. I stopped at the saloon steps, boots sinking in dirt. Eli's men leaned against the railing, guns resting casual, like snakes sunning themselves. Inside, laughter and piano notes stumbled over each other. Grace called after me from the edge of town, voice breaking in the wind. "Jonah, if you walk in there, you don't come back out the same." I looked back once. I already didn't. Then I pushed through the swinging doors, Bible in hand, every eye turning toward the false preacher walking into his brother's den. They say a preacher's pulpit is where truth meets judgment. Mine was a whiskey-stained table surrounded by killers. The saloon's lamps flickered like nervous candles. Eli sat at the center, boots on a gaming table, spurs glinting. His man lined the walls, guns half drawn but grinning, churchgoers of a darker faith. "Welcome to my congregation," Eli said. "Heard you been preaching forgiveness. Let's see if it sticks." I set my Bible on the bar. The barkeep froze when he saw the metal glint inside its hollowed pages. "Psalm 51, I said, "for mercy." Laughter rippled through the room. "Read it then," Eli said, kicking back his chair. "Let's hear the gospel from a sinner's throat." So I read. My voice came rough but steady, each verse shaking loose another ghost. "Have mercy upon me, O God. Blot out my transgressions." One of Eli's men spat. "Ain't no blotting out murder, preacher." I didn't answer. I just turned the page. My hand trembled, not from fear, from remembering. "Tell him about the train job," Eli cut in. "Tell him how your mercy bought you a hangman's pardon." The room quieted. Even the piano stopped. I looked at my brother, his scar catching the light like a brand. "You want a sermon?" You get one. I closed the Bible hard. I ran with devils, same as you. I pulled the trigger that took a man's son. I wore my guilt like a second skin till it chafed the soul raw. Then I found a robe and called it faith. A chair scraped back. Eli's smirk faltered. Keep going, he said, softer now. I ain't better than you, Eli, just tired. Tired of the sound sin makes when it echoes too long. The words hung there, thick as smoke. Then someone cocked a hammer. The sound cut through the silence. Eli turned slow, eyes on his men. Guess the sermon's over. The gunshot came from the back, a drunk trying to be bold. The bullet tore through the mirror instead of me, and the place erupted. Glass, fire, panic, and I ran. Out the side door, through smoke and shouting. My horse wasn't far, but I didn't make for it. I made for the church. Grace met me there, breathless, pistol in hand. You're bleeding. I said, not mine, though I wasn't sure. She dragged me inside, barred the door. The church smelled of dust and old sins. They won't stop, Jonah. You exposed him. You exposed you. I sank against the wall, hands shaking as I reloaded the rounds from my Bible. No hiding left. That's when a knock came, light, deliberate. Grace tensed, gun raised, but it wasn't Eli, just a child, barefoot, eyes too old for his face. He held out a folded scrap of paper. I opened it under the flickering lamp. The handwriting was Eli's. He knows where you buried the judge. The words turned my stomach to stone.
The note felt heavier than any bullet I'd ever chambered. He knows where you buried the judge. But I'd never told a soul where that grave lay. Not Grace, not even Eli. Night swallowed the town whole as we rode out past the churchyard. The moon was a crooked coin in the sky, the wind sharp enough to cut breath. Grace rode beside me, shawl pulled tight, her eyes full of questions she was too wise to ask. We reached the ridge overlooking the old courthouse ruins. Below it, the tree line curled around a patch of ground that still looked wrong after all these years. Too smooth, too still. That's where he rests, I said. Grace slid off her horse. Or don't. We dug in silence, shovels striking earth like guilty hearts. The deeper we went, the heavier the smell. Old soil, rot, and something bitter, like memory, turned sour. When the spade hit wood, I stopped. Judge Cross, I whispered, my father. Grace knelt, brushed away the dirt, and pried the coffin lid open. The hinges groaned like they didn't want to remember. Empty. No bones, no boots, no judge. Just a single thing left at the bottom. A rusted gavel, stained dark. Grace lifted it with 2 fingers, holding it like it might bite. What kind of man gets stolen from his own grave? The kind that never stayed buried, I said. That's when I saw the tracks. Boot prints, fresh, circling the site. The same pattern Eli used to leave when he was tailing bounty wagons. He dug him up, I muttered. He wants me to see it. Grace looked toward town. Then what for? To finish the trial. We rode back fast, hooves throwing sparks on the rocks. From the ridge we saw torches flickering near the church. Eli's men, 6, dragging something heavy toward the chapel doors. Jonah,
Grace said, voice trembling. "They're carrying a body." We slipped closer through the dark until the firelight caught it, a shape wrapped in canvas, boots protruding, the sheriff's badge pinned to the chest. Grace gasped, "That's my husband's." "Stay here," I said, drawing the revolver from my Bible. I crept down the slope, but they were gone before I reached the chapel. Only the door left swinging, cross nailed upside down above it. Inside, the pews were gone, replaced by a rough wooden table, the judge's old gavel laid atop it. They were building something. A gallows. When I turned to warn Grace, she was gone. I ran outside calling her name and saw her silhouette high above, dangling from the church steeple. Not from the neck, not yet, but from her wrists, rope biting her skin, wind whipping her skirt. A sign hung around her neck, scrawled in black ink. "Come preach to me, brother."
They'd hung her from the steeple like an offering, not to God, but to my sins. Grace swayed against the sky, wrists bound, face pale in the torchlight. The crowd below gathered in uneasy silence. Eli stood before him, his hat tipped low, voice smooth as ever. "Your preacher's come to save souls," he called out. "Let's see if he can save one more." I rode straight through the crowd, Bible in one hand, rope knife in the other. Guns followed my every step. The noose from the half-built gallows swayed in the wind, raw hemp, new and waiting. "Let her down, Eli," I said. He smiled like a wolf. "Trade's fair. You take her place." I dropped the Bible to the dirt. Done. Gasps rippled through the townsfolk. Someone muttered a prayer. Others backed away. Eli grinned wider. "Didn't think you'd surrender that easy." "I've been surrendering my whole life," I said. Two of his men cut Grace loose, tossing her aside like a broken doll. She hit the ground hard, coughing. I wanted to run to her, but the rifles behind me said otherwise. Eli tossed me the noose. "You know how this goes, preacher. Say your piece." He kicked away the stool, tied the rope round the gallows beam himself, humming the same hymn our father used to make us sing during executions, the same hymn that echoed in my nightmares. I met his eyes. "You want a sermon? You'll get one." He nodded to his men. The crowd fell silent. I began reciting, low at first, steady as thunder rolling in. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Eli laughed, circling me. "Go on, brother." "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." My voice rose. "He restoreth my soul." Behind the saloon, I saw movement, faint, shadowed, 3 men with rifles slipping along rooftops. The signal had been sent hours ago, through whispers and promises. All they'd needed was my cue. I looked down at Grace. Her eyes caught mine, filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time: belief. I reached the final line, pausing long enough for Eli to frown. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," I tilted my head slightly toward the church tower and finished, "I will fear no evil, for I brought my own." Eli's smile faded just as the first shot rang out. Glass shattered, torches fell, and the steeple bell split the sky with its death knell. Townsfolk scattered as bullets screamed through the square. I lunged off the platform, rope snapping behind me. Grace grabbed my arm, dragging me down behind the church steps. "Jonah," she gasped. "Stay low," I said, pulling her close as fire lit the night. Eli shouted orders above the chaos. "Find him! End this holy war!" The preacher's voice was gone. Only the outlaw remained. I thumbed the hammer back on my gun, smoke curling from the muzzle flash. The battle for Redemption Crossing had begun.
Gunfire turned the night into thunder. The church bell, cracked from the shot, tolled without rhythm. Every swing a scream. Grace and I crawled through shattered pews as bullets splintered wood inches above our heads. Smoke rolled in thick, stinging the eyes, painting everything in ghost light. The air reeked of burning oil and blood. "Jonah," Grace coughed, reloading with trembling hands. "They're inside." I fired through the broken doorway. One man fell, another ran. "Stay behind the altar," I said, though the altar itself was half-eaten by flame. Through the haze, I saw shapes moving. Townsfolk, once cowered by Eli's gang, now fighting back. A rancher with a pitchfork, a woman with a pistol in her apron, even the priest with his old musket. Redemption Crossing had finally found something worth praying with its hands for. A bullet grazed my shoulder, hot pain searing down the bone. I staggered but kept firing. The smoke made ghosts of everyone. You couldn't tell saint from sinner. Then Eli's voice cut through the chaos. "Brother!" He stood near the pulpit, backlit by the burning cross that had fallen from the wall. His gun hung at his side, eyes wild but alive. He shouted, "All this for a lie?" I stepped closer, revolver steady. "It ain't about lies anymore." He smirked. "Still trying to save me? Trying to save myself?" The fire crackled between us. For a moment, the world shrunk to two brothers and a ruin of faith. Grace stumbled from behind the pew, clutching her side. "Jonah, stop!" Eli turned toward her. That was all it took. Pulled the trigger. The bullet hit his shoulder, spun him backward into the pulpit. He dropped, clutching the wound, laughter bubbling through the blood. "You're always the better shot," he coughed, "but still the worst man." I aimed again, then stopped. He wasn't raising his gun, just looking at me like a mirror cracked down the middle. I lowered the hammer. "I ain't your judge, Eli." He spat red, smiling faintly. "You never were." I holstered my revolver and reached to help him, but the ceiling groaned above us. Flames ate the beams. The crucifix fell between us, splitting the floorboards. I dragged Grace clear as the roof collapsed, burying the altar in cinders. When the fire dimmed to embers, I found Eli still breathing among the wreckage, half buried in ash. He grabbed my wrist weakly. "You still don't know," he whispered. "Know what?" "Why I killed the judge." His eyes flickered, the way our fathers did before passing sentence. It wasn't revenge. Then what? He coughed once, the sound deep as thunder before rain. It was mercy. And then his hand slipped away. The dawn crept through smoke-stained glass as the last shots faded into silence. When morning broke, the church was nothing but smoke and bone. Eli lay in the ashes, his blood drying to dust on the floorboards. Grace sat near him, face gray with soot and grief. "He's gone," she whispered. I knelt beside him, hands trembling. "Not yet." He stirred, eyes half open. The firelight caught his face, softer now. No sneer, no venom. Just the boy I used to chase through wheat fields before law and sin divided us. "Listen," he rasped. "You think I killed him for vengeance?" "You shot our father in the back, Eli." He coughed, shaking his head. "No, I buried him before he could hang another innocent man." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Eli's eyes darted toward the broken altar, where half a ledger smoldered in the embers. He gestured weakly. "He sold justice. Every sentence, bought with gold." I grabbed the book from the fire, pages still hot. Inside were names, men, women, even children, all marked guilty beside crude tallies of gold coins. "He built Redemption Crossing on blood money," Eli said. "You preached in his church, wearing his lies like vestments." The ledger slipped from my hand. My knees hit the floor. All those hangings I'd defended as a boy, calling it law, calling it order, it was just commerce and death. Grace knelt beside me, voice low. "You didn't know." "I testified for him, said he was a righteous man, helped hang 3 who begged mercy." He smiled faintly. "You were the only one he fooled." He reached inside his coat and pressed a folded letter into my palm. "You're the law now, Jonah." "No," I said, "no more law." "Then make something better." His voice cracked. "Make something true." He died before I could answer. I carried him outside as the townsfolk gathered. The fire behind us smoldered like a burned-out conscience. The priest looked at the body. "What will you do with him?" "I'll bury him proper," I said. "He earned at least that." Grace watched me, eyes hollow. "In the town." I looked at the rising sun, spilling light over the ruin. "They'll need a new judge, or a new kind of man." She nodded slowly. "That's you?" "I don't know yet." The flames finally died, leaving only ash drifting in the wind, like snow over graves. I opened Eli's letter with a shaking hand. Inside were only 6 words, written in his uneven scrawl. "All men hang, some just slower." By noon, I'd buried him beside the empty grave of our father. When I stood, the town was silent. No bells, no prayers, just the sound of wind whistling through the broken cross atop the steeple.
Dawn crept cold over Redemption Crossing, washing the ashes silver. 2 graves waited before me, one filled, one empty. Eli lay in his, still and quiet. The other pit, where the judge once rotted, gaped open like a question I'd never answer. Grace stood behind me, holding the sheriff's badge. She said, "You should wear it." I shook my head. "A badge don't make a man clean." "No," she said, pinning it to my vest anyway. "But it might remind you what clean's supposed to look like." We buried Eli with no psalms, no eulogies, just the creak of rope, the scrape of dirt, and the whistle of the dry wind carrying away the last of the Cross family. When it was done, Grace knelt, brushed the dust from her skirts, and looked at me one final time. "You gonna stay?" I nodded. Somebody's got to keep the next fool from turning sermons into gallows. She sighed, eyes wet but steady. Then I reckon I'll ride east. I'm done mistaking gunfire for hymns. She mounted her horse without another word. I watched her ride out, the morning light folding her into the horizon. Didn't even wave. Maybe she knew I wouldn't. The town was quiet as a held breath. Burned timbers still smoked where the church had stood. I walked through the ruins, every step stirring up ghosts. Inside the sacristy, half-charred pages from my Bible fluttered against the floorboards. The hollow spine where I once hid my revolver lay open, empty, a shell of two lives, outlaw and preacher, both dead now. I struck a match and let it fall inside. The fire took fast, curling the paper into black wings. The smoke smelled like penance. Then I sat at the pulpit's remains, the sheriff's badge glinting in the dust beside me, and opened a blank ledger, the same one my father had used to sell lives. I dipped a quail into Eli's dried blood and began to write. No sermons, no verses, just truth. I am Jonah Cross, son of a false judge, brother to a murderer, preacher of nothing but consequence. Outside, the wind carried faint laughter. Could have been Eli's or my own echo. I kept writing, page after page, until the sun climbed high enough to make the smoke look like heaven's own veil. When I ran out of words, I looked down at the final line my hand had carved in trembling strokes. In the beginning, there was no God, only man with guns. And maybe that was enough gospel for Redemption Crossing.